Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome everyone to another episode of Recover You. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
Hi, Patrick. All right. Today, we are going to talk about the number one emotion a sex or porn addict must heal in order to truly recover. That's exciting.
It is exciting. It's a big one. It's a big one. Yes.
Don't forget, if you missed last week's episode, you can go back and listen to the first couple minutes of that. But don't forget that Patrick and I are hosting Sexual Integrity 101 this summer. Two days in May, 2 days in June. It's a live thing for people that are in Dayton, Ohio, that area. And it is for anyone connected to a church or any leadership in church that you know that may be interested in bringing recovery resources to your spiritual community. So if that is you, there is a link to register in the show notes. So make sure to take a look at that. And if you want a little more details, I went into more detail in the last episode. Also, update on the Recover You Facebook page.
Drum roll, please.
Ooh, do we have a drum roll?
I don't think so.
So it's been a little bit of a journey. I'm going to keep this really, really short. There's nothing we can do, basically, about the original one. I think it is gone. Facebook had made... I don't know. There's some indication that, I don't know if it's caught up in a loop or something, but there's maybe a slight possibility if there's a glitch that maybe it will be released to me at some time in the future, but not anything that I can count on, and there's really nothing that I can do about it at this point. So that being said, I think what I'm going to do is create a new group. When that is available to join and ready, I'll make sure that that's all set up, and I will invite you all to it, and I'll include a link and all that fun stuff. But just want to give you a little update. That's the direction we are headed. Nothing really I can do at this point. We're going to have to rebuild from scratch. So it's a little bit of a bummer because a lot of the resources that were in the old group will be gone. Not gone, just like, we had questions that people would post. And so like the history of support is going to kind of, that part's gone. But a lot of the resources that I offered, whether it be, the podcast guide or, just different things that I created, we will have that. And, sometimes that happens and it'll be okay. We can restart. So that's I think that's where we're headed in that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but it's a chance to create something new.
Yeah. Try to look at the positive there. A little frustrating, but we're gonna make something good out of it, hopefully.
Absolutely.
All right, Patrick, let's talk about shame.
I feel shame today. I feel shame.
I hope not.
So shame is one of the major contributing factors to keeping us in addiction, and there's a lot of ways shame comes about, but shame is. If I actually think the Conquer series does a really, really good job of kind of defining shame. And shame is there's something wrong with me versus, let's say, guilt, which is I've done something bad. So
I've done something bad versus I am something bad.
I am bad, right? So, it's hard to heal beyond the version that you have of yourself. And so shame kind of keeps you in this stuck version. And shame can come from many things. Shame comes from the childhood wounding that we talk about, or the adult wounding that you go through. I often talk to the guys in the group, and I say, hey, our behavior is actually a wound too. Behavior is the wound, and getting discovered is a wound because it's a very traumatic thing. And I know for those of you who are betrayed, you may be like, I don't care, but it is a traumatic thing, and it can be very wounding, and it can really drive a lot of shame when you get discovered and you see the impact of what you've done. It can really heap shame upon it. And so there's some good literature out there that talks about like how does shame come about. And if you think about it from a religious standpoint, like let's say the evangelical church, and the Pure Desire community, they really try to change this, and we try to as well. But if you think about the traditional way where a pastor stands up there and says, hey, you just need to stop it, or you just need to pray harder. So if you're praying hard and it doesn't go away, then you can take a message that your prayers aren't answered, or you're not doing it right, or that
you're not worthy of God helping you.
Right. Yeah. And we believe prayer is powerful, and reading the Bible is powerful. But I think I said to somebody today, I was like, God gave us teeth, but he also gave us dentists. And so it's like,
that's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. So it's like, that's why when people give bad advice, like, just pray it away, as opposed to, hey, these are the systems that we can do to help you get beyond that shame and help you start to process through that shame. The group experience, the right group experience can do that for you. But shame really keeps you stuck, and it takes a long time to shed the shame. And I go through some things personally with you and I, and some of the experiences we go through, where I will question still and be like, am I feeling guilt right now? Or am I ashamed? And so it's not always easy to spot it, but I think maybe one of the ways is, how do you react when you're in it? So
yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying that, actually, it's like shame is usually more of like a freeze response, like, because shame is one of those things that's going to keep you from action.
Right.
It's because you're afraid. Shame makes you afraid to tell anybody, because when you believe that you are bad, then the outcome of that means that if somebody finds out, they are going to think that I'm bad. And so when you think that you are bad and shame is the driving emotion behind something, its automatic end result is basically keeping you stuck.
Yeah.
That's kind of
right.
Versus guilt, maybe you believe in confession, or you don't think you're a horrible human, but you did something bad, and so like you can apologize or something like that. So I think that's maybe one way to kind of think about the difference between the two, is like, how much of a grip does it have on your ability to communicate or like talk about what you've done?
Yeah. And you and I have had some recent things where we have worked through some things. You had some questions about something in a spam folder and things like that. And I was thinking about when those questions were coming up, how did you gauge my reaction?
You were chill.
Very chill. I wasn't trying to get off the phone. I wasn't trying to...
I was also chill, let's be clear.
So anyway, we'll talk about lying and denial next. No, just kidding.
That's so mean. I was very calm, was I not?
No, you were calm. Yeah. But I think, 3 years ago...
3 years ago I wouldn't have been.
Well, and this is... I actually have gone through this too. I remember, and I think I've said this before, but I remember thinking after I was discovered, and there are some things that I was absolutely responsible for, right? Some things that, there were charges in our bank account, and there were emails and things like that were absolutely 100% my fault. And then there were other things that weren't my fault, like things in spam folders. And so...
well, let's be clear. You get more in your spam folder when you have put your email somewhere.
Of course, yeah.
Or you've clicked on something and you've engaged in bad behavior.
Right. So, but
there's not complete innocence there.
I do remember thinking that in some way I was responsible for all of it, like worldwide, globally. You know what I mean? So like I would go through like I never went. Go ahead. No, I never went to like a gentleman's club, right? And so since we were way early on in my life, I had, but that wasn't part of my acting out pattern. But then all of a sudden I felt responsible for there's a club in our town that's here. And I remember that was a process for me to be like, okay, I don't have to feel guilt, or I don't have to feel ashamed that place is there, because I never frequented that place. And I think that was a big part of shame for me. It's like, in some way I was responsible and accountable for all the behaviors, all of the way it manifested itself in the world. And so, but I think
the fact that sex addiction exists in the world is Patrick's fault.
Yeah. And so I think that was a shame thing. You know, I was very ashamed of who I was.
Because you felt an association with these bad things, and those bad things reminded you of of your behavior.
Right,
probably.
right. So over time, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no, I'm not responsible for the people that go there. I'm not responsible for any of that. And it's so it comes down to, hey, I'm responsible for what I did, and but I'm not responsible for what like in our particular situation, the questions you had, that was just some crazy algorithm happening. It's not my issue, and so I'm not responsible for that, and so like I was actually thinking I wanted to ask you. Go ahead. I wanted to ask you this. So the first time I stood up in front of Centerville Grace and announced that we were doing the Conquer series, right? I was so nervous. I was so scared. I was like, I don't know what people are going to think of me when I get up there. I don't know how people are going to react to me. And so that is what was going through my mind. What was going through your mind?
Oh, I have to think about that. That's a complicated one because I have some church trauma. And because of that, I can, with sensitive stuff that involve, like sensitive topics where maybe the church is involved, I can get very defensive and feel very insecure, and like I have to put my defenses up to protect myself, or in this case, protect myself and protect you, because I'm worried. And so I think I was very tense. I think I was very tense. Like I didn't know how it was going to, I logically knew that it was going to be a safe experience for us, but emotionally it felt very scary for me. And so I think I was super tight, tight. Yeah.
Well, how
did
you feel about me getting up there to say that? Because at this point we were a year and a half into recovery.
Yeah. Oh, like what emotions did I have about you doing it? Oh, I was super proud of you.
Right. And I think I knew.
Are you asking was I conflicted about
No, I'm actually
worried about you being in recovery or anything?
No, I'm actually trying to illustrate a point. And the point is, once again, my thought was, I go up there, people are going to think I'm horrible, and and all this stuff. And you're like, I'm proud of you.
I'm super proud of you.
Yeah. So,
and then there were people there that were like, I'm super proud of you for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the amount of kindness that was displayed towards me and things like that. And it's just become a regular thing for me to get up there and talk about it. But we don't receive that. And when we're deep in shame, we still don't. When somebody can turn to you and go, I really love you, and I'm really proud of what you've done and the hard work you've gone, and we don't hear it. Shame puts earplugs in our ears and in our brain that keeps us from hearing these important messages that are incredibly healing. So that's why because we want to receive the healing messages. We want to receive the notion that people are proud of us for what we've done. The redemption story, the story of recovery, is a wonderful one, right? And so often the people who have done tough things or have done bad things will struggle with receiving that as a message of, hey, you've done a really, really good job. I mean, and so it took me a long time to really work through that. And I think it was I think for me, my healing, and I think some of it was artificial, because Ted Roberts says it took him I think he said 3.5 years. And so I had this he said 3 years. And so I had this arbitrary thing that once I got to 3 years, I'd feel better. But it was between 3 and 4 years, I think, for me, somewhere in there, where the healing started to lock in. I started to kind of view my addiction more in a broader perspective of the story of my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And understand how my woundedness and all of that showed up and led to it. Didn't excuse the behavior by any stretch of the means, but it took me a long time to get to that point where I could separate my behavior from me.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of talked about what shame is. It's like this deep belief that I am bad. Like it goes to that identity piece, which we've talked about through the podcast over the past several years in a variety of different ways. But it's really important, I think, to understand that behavior is not identity. It is not who you are. And so that belief can really keep people very stuck. And when you are able to separate the two, then you realize I can actually choose a new identity. I can be the person, I can be somebody else, and I can behave a different way. And this doesn't define who I am. And so that can be really helpful, separating it from the concept of identity. We've sort of mentioned it a little bit, but let's talk about how shame keeps us stuck. I mentioned earlier, I think the emotion keeps us from a natural willingness to talk about it because and you just went into this, there's a belief about how other people are going to view you. Right. That's super, super, super wrapped up in shame. Also is going to, so the addict is going to say, I don't want to talk about it because I'm a bad person. And if I talk about it, I'm going to be found out to be a bad person. But then we have all these cases of, oops, you were found out, right? So like there's discovery instead of confession.
Yeah.
So then after that, okay, well, the behavior's been found out. After that, shame can really keep people stuck because then the addict isn't being present with their partner because they're so stuck in their own shame loop and they're spiraling in their own shame. And that can hinder their ability to empathize. It can hinder their ability to be present. It can hinder their ability to seek deeper healing. Mm-hmm. So if they're, even after discovery, if they are still really stuck and convinced that they're, a horrible person, then, it's ironic because I'm thinking of two opposite ends of the spectrum. The person that's like, oh no, I'm fine, I don't need any help, not seeking therapy, and then skipping over some of the really important healing aspects of recovery. Yeah. And then somebody so steeped in shame going, I can't tell anybody, also skipping things like therapy and missing the really, really deep healing aspects of recovery. Yeah,
yeah. Well, the human experience is, they always say that, and I was talking to somebody today about that, but they always say that, you want to learn, that sex addiction numbs your feelings, right? Really, really numbs your feelings. So if you generally think you're bad, well, then and in order to stop feeling bad, you end up doing the behavior that makes you feel bad. Yeah. And it's just, it's a really crazy cycle that you just, because let's say there's a moment in your life when it, for whatever reason, that's the moment you didn't feel bad about yourself. But, they will say, like, as soon as, I think the old thing that they said in Conquer was, like, as soon as you turn off the computer, the shame's back. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so that's just kind of a euphemism that they say that, like, the shame is always there.
Right.
It's always there, and it drops further. And then when people will white knuckle it, they'll get through 30 days, they feel good, but then they fall again, or they relapse, and then they feel worse. And then it's like, well, if I'm going to relapse, I might as well. And I already suck as a person. I'm just, I'm not worth anything. Well, I might as well just keep relapsing. And I know what was really at play with me was, you're going to eventually recognize that I'm not worth being married to. And so probably the sooner you get to that point, the better off we'll both be. And you can go off and do your thing. And so
what you just said is a way that shame can manifest into self-sabotage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, even when I was doing good through recovery, because I did do good through recovery, it was relationally, it wasn't showing up in addiction behavior anymore, but it was showing up in relational things. I wasn't speaking up for myself. And we always got to be really careful saying that, because I want to make sure that I articulate that. Like, I was very, I wanted to make sure you were happy. So much so to the point where I wouldn't say, no, I don't think I want to do that. I would, you know what I mean? And so that in and of itself is a shaming thing, because it's almost like a people-pleasing thing. Like, your feeling or your thought on this is not worth anything. It's always more important that person gets what they want over you. And so, what I switched on this, from very much my shame drove me to addiction. My shame drove me to extreme kind of people pleasing. And it's a balance, right? Because I think a lot of those things I needed to do. I needed to show up for you, and I needed to be there for you. But I think where we have really thrived as a couple is because we were out of balance. You were kind of in charge of me, right? And you didn't want to be in charge of me, but you had this role where you got everything that you needed, and I never asked. Or I never said, hey, could I get this or whatever. I just felt like it.
And let's also clarify, we're not talking about sex, just for anybody, because there are situations where addicts will come in and go, well, I need this. And it's all about like the physical stuff. And that's not what we're talking about.
Right. It's not at all. It's hey, what do you want to watch? Or what do you want to,
like you're a full human being that's allowed to have opinions.
Yeah. And I remember it was like, kind of like these unreasonable behaviors was, like I was responsible for all the sex addiction in the world. And like, I couldn't speak up for anything that I wanted to do. I couldn't say where I wanted to go eat. I couldn't, and that's not real life either, but
and that's a tricky balance too, I think, because as you're in recovery, you are going to defer to the traumatized partner to some extent while you're stabilizing, right? Like,
right.
But then there's this phase of like, okay, we're getting into recovery now. Now the rebalance is almost like this little miniature earthquake while you guys are figuring out like how that happens in a healthy way, so that you can be a full person, with opinions, with thoughts, and you guys navigate that in a healthy way. Yeah.
I remember thinking in that I wanted to be, because I hadn't been, I wanted to be everything, anything and everything to you at any moment of every need that you had. And like, you think of the impossible standard that is, and that I was working on my own recovery, and I couldn't, nobody can maintain that level of energy. You know what I mean? I think I did a pretty good job trying to meet your needs through this process and being present. But shame is what kept me in that mindset. And it took me a while to start saying, hey, is it okay if we do this? Or, hey, I need to go to, like, I remember the first time I said to you, because we would have a lot of late night conversations, right, about this. And I remember the first time, like, I got up the courage to be like, hey, I need to get some sleep. And it wasn't week 2. It was
a couple years in, I think.
Yeah. And I was like, I have to go to bed. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, because I have a pretty high pressure job and I get up early and things like that. And so there's a notion of self-care there. Now, once again, day 2, it's not appropriate to turn to your betrayed spouse and be like, hey, I really need to get some sleep. You know what I mean? So
shame can show up for the betrayed partner a little bit too in that that beginning part. Because it's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
And there is this piece that it's like we absorb the shame in a sense of like, well, I can't tell anybody, how am I going to be perceived? Very similar things. So I think it's mostly it would be on the addict side, but I think it definitely can show up on the betrayed side too.
Well, I would think, and you don't have to be in a church where somebody tells you, well, you need to be available for him. You can just take that on. You can go, well, was I just not enough for him? I mean, that's a human thing. I think when we get hurt, we go, it's kind of like, it's like how children will shoulder the burden for divorce. They'll say, well, I was not enough and I forced my parents to, that's just a wound that they take on. And the parents may be so well adjusted and they may be working with them and telling them it's not their fault, but you take that, you actually do that.
Okay, so we've defined it. We've talked about different ways that it can keep us stuck. We've talked about some real life ways that it can show up. What can we do to move through shame? It's obviously, I think, one of the biggest things that's going to really wreak havoc if it's not addressed in some way.
So I think practice is very, very important, and having a checklist really, really kind of helps in this process. So I've mentioned the book Help or Heal before. So I think if you're in a relationship where you're working with a betrayed partner, the book Help or Heal helps you develop techniques where you can. It's almost like, I hate to say fake it till you make it, but sometimes that's part of it, right?
Think about it as practicing.
Right, yeah.
So maybe it's not faking it, it's practicing something until it becomes second nature. Like any habit is going to feel uncomfortable and weird for the first time you do it.
Right.
You brush your teeth with your right hand, it's going to feel super awkward. If you did it every day for 90 days, it'd probably get pretty easy.
In my case, my left hand.
Right, because I'm left-handed.
Yeah, right.
Good point. Good catch.
Yeah. So I think trying, you and I went through this. You needed me to stay, not in the relationship, not in the house. You needed me to stay in the moment when you were angry. You needed me to stay in the moment when you were asking questions. And because those were hard for me because of my deep levels of shame, when you were like, did you do this? Right? And I was committed to answering those honestly, but I wanted to be like, yes, see you, bye. You know what I mean? As I ran away. So I think, some practice, some rehearsal helps you stay in those moments and be able to be there. Even asking your spouse, hey, what do you need to see from me when we're talking? Because shame can show up, quite strongly in your reaction to the questions, in your reaction to that, you don't want to be defensive. So I would say just mental rehearsal first, to make sure that you can stay in difficult situations. For those of you who are single, you may not be wrestling with the betrayal part. So I think the second thing, which would apply to both sides, would be you've got to start working through the things that you're wounded by. So, for example, in Conquer, it's your 10 worst moments. Maybe in therapy, it's your trauma egg, and you're working through those things and what negative self-belief came out of that. And you want to start to work to reframe those. Conquers has a process where through the use of scripture, you kind of come up with a prophetic promise that counters the wound, the lie that you had. Therapy can help you reframe some things. Therapy can help you process through it with EMDR or brain spotting or whatever that is to help you kind of, create a new memory of what that is. You can actually heal your inner child, for lack of a better term. So those are really, really important. And then I think patience. You have to recognize that you have spent your whole life, in essence, in shame over this. And it's not going to stop it's not going to be an easy thing to drop within 30 days. You're going to have to be patient with yourself. You're going to have to recognize that sometimes you don't get it right. Sometimes, for like myself, sometimes I don't know what to say. And I think I've told you that. I'd be like, I don't know what to say right now. You know what I mean? And I think some of that is just me processing through it. Maybe shame is maybe there's some shame debris still rolling around in there. And so there's been a couple times with you and I where we've been in situations where you'll go, I don't think you're being completely open with me. You won't say honest. You'll say completely open with me. And there are times I'll be like, oh no, I've told you everything, right? And as to how I'm feeling, and I have. And there's other times where I'm like, well, I don't know. And so it takes, so I guess my point is you got to be really patient with yourself, because this unwinding of shame is a lengthy process. It's not a short one.
I'm going to give my perspective on, and maybe it's slightly different. Maybe I think it overlaps a little bit, but on 3 things that you can do to, navigate this. I think the number one thing you should do with shame is talk about it. Because the things that we are the most ashamed about and the most afraid to talk about are the number one things that we have to talk about. There's a reason that we say the truth will set you free. Most of the time, the things you feel super ashamed about are things that you will find either healing from or love and acceptance or whatever. But like, you think about when you're abused as a child, as an example, and you carry that your whole life, and you hold that internalized shame that you're bad and that this is so embarrassing, and then you talk to people about it, and then they put words to it, and then they say, oh, hey, this is abuse. This is what happened to you. Let me put this into context. And then you realize that this thing that you've been carrying your whole life was created from the understanding and awareness of a child. And you're an adult now.
Right.
And it wasn't even a complete understanding, because it was like a kid brain that created this emotion.
Right.
That's just an example. I mean, shame shows up in a lot of different ways, but hopefully that's an example that is relatable and understandable in the context of my second point, which is you've got to separate it from your identity. It's not who you are.
Right.
And I think when people get so caught up in, well, this is just who I am, or this bad personality trait is, or a bad pattern is a personality trait, or this addiction is, we've talked about disease versus trauma model. It's a disease or it's a genetic, whatever. I think we put all these limitations on ourselves as opposed to going, I can be a different person. Like, I have the capability. Humans, brains have capability to change. Humans have capability to transform. And habits have all the possibility to delete old habits and build new habits. So all of that is possible. So I think we have to talk about it. We have to find safe people to talk to. Maybe that's starting with your partner. Maybe that is reaching out to a safe therapist, whatever it is. But like, those are, I think anything you feel shame about is something you should find a safe space for. We've got to talk about it. We've got to, because it's like, if I had to guess, and I don't know the answer to this, I know we've talked about the most powerful frequency being authenticity, where most people would guess love. I would venture to guess that one of the most depleting frequencies would be shame. That it's like the most, like, it kills you slowly.
Right.
And if it's not the lowest, it's somewhere close to that, fear, shame, guilt, all of those being just incredibly damaging long term. And then the third one, so we got to talk about it. We got to separate it from your identity. And then the third one, I think, would be, some of the things that you were mentioning is that we've got to process it. So we've gotten it out there. We know it's not who we are, but how can we navigate that? You mentioned EMDR, brain spotting, things like that. There's parts work, there, internal family systems. There's all sorts of different subconscious modalities that we've talked about in a variety of different ways. But working with somebody that can actually help you navigate that part of yourself. And when you talk about parts, when you talk about things like shame and addiction, you've talked about this with your addiction part. Like, you just wanted to exile it. You wanted to kick it out. You wanted to hate it. You wanted to, and sometimes the hardest work we have to do is learning to have compassion on the parts of ourselves that have done the worst things.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why did that part do that?
Yeah.
Why was that the coping mechanism? Why was that the acting out? And when we can separate that from like our identity and go, hey, this is a wounded part that needs some compassion. It's not the totality of who I am. Maybe it's this little part of me, or maybe it's this coping mechanism, or maybe it was something that helped me survive as a child, or maybe it's something that, there's two sides to the coin with this, where it is a negative behavior and it served a beneficial purpose in some way. And that is a really uncomfortable comment to make.
Right.
And it's a really uncomfortable comment, I think, for everybody, maybe addict and betrayed partner to hear. Someone might hear that and go, that's super, that's super triggering. Like, and I totally get that. And I hope I hope that didn't upset anyone hearing that. But what I mean by that is, if it is a self-medicating thing, or if it's a survival, any of those things, they're there to serve a beneficial purpose. Now, the outcome or the way that it is serving that purpose is bad. We're never going to sugarcoat that. So if we can figure out, well, what was it actually trying to do for us? Was it trying to cover up our loneliness? Was it trying to cover up our anger? Was it trying to cover up our abandonment? Was it trying to cover up being bullied? Is it like, what is it that hurt so much that we had to keep doing this thing that hurt myself and other people in the process?
Right.
And I think it's when you're able to get to that level of the self-analysis, that level of the compassion, that level of the reflection, that is where the freedom comes in. When we're talking about all of the episodes where we've talked about sobriety versus recovery, when we've talked about long-term versus short-term, how do we actually get to freedom? That's how it's like that. We have to get to that deeper level where if we can have compassion on the thing that we hate the most, that's going to be transformational.
Yeah. I know, like the moments in the therapy chair when I was able to rescue either a younger version of me or an older version of me, there was something that happened when I was younger. I was exposed to something, and I was able to. The therapist walked me through kind of me rescuing me in that situation. That's a really powerful thing. The car accident that I went through. The therapist walked me through a process where I was able to process it, but then he helped replace it with higher level identity of me, because one of the negative self beliefs is I can't take care of my family. Coming out of the accident, right? Well, it was an accident, right? And everybody knew that, but me, I took. And so changing that. So being able to come in and rescue and help and comfort yourself in those old memories, and being able to look on your addict part as somebody that's worthy of compassion. Yeah, it goes a long way towards helping reduce the amount of shame that's in you. Yeah.
So I think maybe we can wrap up with this question, from the addict perspective, as somebody who's actually gone through all of that and then done so much of the deeper work to actually come to the other side and like feel like I'm not even worried about relapsing, because it's so far removed now. Something that I thought I would never be free from is so far removed now from even my awareness of a possibility in my life. And so many people listening might go, oh my gosh, is that a possibility? Like, that's what I want in my life. So what would you maybe say to individuals that are kind of stuck in the cerebral around their recovery? So I logically understand everything. I know why I do this. I've connected all the dots, and it's all sort of in that logical, like, cerebral awareness. But they haven't done some of that deeper emotional work.
I would say you're probably afraid of because the shame is so palpable. You don't want to feel it again. So then you'll logic your way through recovery. And I think understand that if you allow your body to feel everything that you're feeling while you're processing your shame, what you'll find is the shame starts to get replaced by sorrow or guilt or pain or regret or things like that, which are, I think you said this to me, we were talking about something, you were like, don't get up tomorrow and go around feeling all bad, or don't feel bad about this. I think you said, don't feel bad about this. And I think my response was no, you it's important that I feel bad, not ashamed.
Right, like, yeah.
But it's important.
Like, I don't need to spiral, but it's important for me to feel negative emotions about those things.
Yeah. Like, if you're sad,
because that's a human experience.
That's right. So, I think what because we've run away from the feelings of shame, and then now we're trying to work the process and say, hey, I'm okay. Like, it's okay to feel the broad range of emotions that come from that, because the only way you can identify what the different feelings are, shame, guilt, once again, sorrow, anger, whatever those things may be, is you've got to let your guard down and feel them. And so sometimes what happens is, we've talked about spiritual bypass, but sometimes, and I think I just thought about this when you said this, is like, I'll see people try to outwork their emotions. And
therapy bypass.
Yeah, therapy bypass.
Or like podcast bypass.
Yeah, so they listen to all the podcasts, which is great. You should. They will do all
knowledge bypass.
Yeah, they'll do all the knowledge, and then they'll still have an issue, and it's because they're not allowing themselves to drop in, I think is the term you use, and feel all of those deep emotions that
Well, and to your point, I think part of that is because it's scary. So one of the things to understand in therapy or in coaching or whoever helps you kind of navigate this process is really learning that, yes, these emotions feel overwhelming now, but that's because they've been avoided for so long that there's so many built up and they feel very, very strong. Like, if you hadn't had chocolate in years and then you taste it, it feels super sweet at first, right? It's like big, and overwhelming. But over time, as you allow yourself, and it's going to be hard up front, you know that that's going to happen. But over time, you just get to normal humanity experience, a lived human experience where You just have all the emotions.
That's right.
And all of them are manageable. And so it will get to the point, but in order to get to a place of resiliency and capacity, you have to allow yourself the discomfort up front. And I think that's the scary part. But knowing that it won't kill you, it will end. And making sure that you have the support system set up, like therapy and group and people you can talk to about this and journaling and all of these things that we've talked about over the past so many years, that's what helps you navigate that difficult spot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, and one thing that I think I need to say is, addicts, if every time your spouse talks to you about things that you've done to hurt them, and you take over the conversation by like, I'm such a horrible person, I'm, gonna hurt myself or whatever. And I don't want to minimize those things, but you may definitely feel that way, but you want to continue to try to get to a point where you can receive as well as you're stating how you feel. So, and I hope I'm saying this the right way.
Both individuals need to seek external help,
right,
to create stability in their own emotional center. So if that person is really, like, to your point, that's a scary thing to say. If they really 100% feel that way, they need support. They need, again, shame.
Right,
they need to talk about that out loud. They need to get help for that. They need to receive support, because one of the reasons that that is a feeling, that is a thought, is because people feel like they're going to be rejected. The more we can talk and get into community and realize that we're loved and we're seen, the less we have, those types of feelings often, especially in these types of situations, like when we realize, like, it really is okay. I am loved. I am safe.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about basically is being a partner, being able to sit with. If your betrayed, wounded, traumatized partner comes and is bringing something up, don't turn it back on them. Don't become the victim. Don't make it all about you. The goal over time is that you can sit there with their emotion, as uncomfortable as it makes you, and know that you're helping them, and that's creating safety for them, and that over time that uncomfortable feeling in you diminishes as you get safer and more solid in your recovery as well. The more we feel uncomfortable with our emotions, the more we should be seeking help on the emotional level from coaches, from therapists, from practitioners. We should be engaged in a community. The less community people have to talk about this particular situation, I cannot really think of a positive that brings. It brings loneliness, it brings overwhelm for both the addict and the betrayed partner. So the more safe community we can find, whether it's support groups or safe family or safe friends, it's really, really important that we have enough people in some capacity on a team that can help us through this. We are not created to do stuff that's this hard alone.
And I would say, for those of you who are in group, and if you go to a group and the group leader says, well, just stop it, or whatever, that's not a good group. That's a shame-inducing
another
group.
Yeah, and some groups are very, very focused on sobriety versus recovery. And that's, again, know where you're at and what phase you're at. And if you need to get in sobriety, use the tools and the groups and the support and the therapists that'll help you get there. And then if those tools and resources and people aren't the best to help you move into the deeper recovery work and the deeper emotional stuff, that's okay. That there can be a new group, a new therapist, a new coach, a new person that can help you do that. So hopefully we're providing enough information and resources in here that sort of gives you that big picture.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can be in environments that are not shame-inducing. Groups that accept your vulnerability and openness, groups that recognize you as not being complete in your healing, and recognize that your journey's not going to be theirs. Sometimes what I'll notice, because I've never relapsed, is I think sometimes folks and I never really talk about that. But I notice sometimes people will be like, well, I relapsed, and they'll be kind of ashamed to say it in front of me. And I'm like, hey, it's really okay. It's, it's part of your healing journey. It is what it is. Learn from it. You know what I mean? Like, understand why you were there, connect the dots, and ask yourself, what was the barrier to you reaching out before you relapsed, right? Those are super important. Yeah, those are super important. But don't say you're a failure. You don't go back to stage one or anything like that. So it's important to do that. So I hope it's shame is a big one, and it can stay with us a long time, but it's important to keep working through it.
Yeah, I think the message in this episode is we don't have to stay there.
Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we'll see you next week.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.